My name is Barbara Northern Clawson, and I'm Morgan's maternal grandmother. I was born in Watauga County in December of 1939. I was born on my mother's birthday, and I always told her that was the best birthday present she would ever get. I was born at home as well as my brothers and sisters, and we lived out in what they call the country farm community. It's about 4 miles from Boone, but it's not country anymore. It's grown up, got a lot of houses, and there aren't many people that farm anymore out there, just one that I know of. And our community was called Bamboo. And then when all the rich people started moving in, they didn't like the word bamboo, so they changed it to the Deerfield section.
What was your house like that you grew up in?
Well, my grandfather, Vance Bond, he was my mother's father. He built the house that I grew up in sometime between 1912 and 1924. And I never got to see him because he died in 1924. He was young. He was just in his 40s, and he had cancer. And it was a big house. I don't know. I think it had 4 bedrooms upstairs and a big hall, and 2 bedrooms downstairs, and a living room, and a little room in the middle of the house. I don't know what we called it, but it's where we played games and stuff when it was cold, and because the stove was in there. And then it had kind of a dining room kitchen together. So it was a big house, and it had a porch all around 3 sides of it. And we didn't have a bathroom in the house. We had an outhouse. And it was a long time. I was a big girl before we got electricity in our house. And it had no heat except for a wood stove in the room that I was describing that was kind of in the middle of the house. And in the wintertime, my father would get up early, and he would build a big fire in the stove in that room, and he'd build one in the kitchen cook stove so my mother could start breakfast. And when he got it good and warm downstairs, he would, now I'm talking warm just in that room and in the kitchen, he would yell for us to come downstairs, and we would come running down. And one day my sister, my older sister, was carrying me on her back, and she dropped me down the steps, but I was okay. And it was in the wintertime. It was so cold, and in the room that we slept in upstairs, sometimes we'd wake up in the morning time and the window would be completely covered with ice inside. And because most of the homes that were built back then out in the country, they didn't have any insulation. And at night before we went to bed, our parents would heat the iron. This is the iron, not the electric iron, because we didn't have any electricity. It was an iron, and I don't know what it was made of. I guess Mama probably had a couple of them, and when I say an iron, it was an iron that she would put on the hot stove, and when it got hot, she would iron, and when it cooled off, she put it back on the stove and iron. Then she'd iron some more. But they'd heat that iron up and wrap it in towels and put it at the bottom of our bed to help the bed get warm. And because your feet, time we got upstairs, our feet were freezing, so it was always good to jump into that bed. And my sisters and I slept together in the winter time, mostly to keep warm.
What do you know about your grandparents?
Well, my maternal grandfather that built the house was from Taylorsville, North Carolina, and his mother, whom we called Granny Tyne. Now, I think I saw her, but I was so little I didn't remember. I was just a baby. And his brother and sister, they moved to Watauga County in the late 1800s. And I don't know how my grandfather and grandmother met. My grandmother was the only, on my mother's side, was the only grandparent I ever saw. And I was 11 years old when she passed away. And my father's parents lived in Tennessee, but they both died long before I was born. And I don't know much about them. I do have a picture of them, and I have a little history about them. And my grandfather, Northern, was married twice, and he had a big family. And I found the write-up in a newspaper about him when it died, and I don't know if it was a mistake or not, but he said he had 150 grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So he did have a big family. So I've got cousins all over Tennessee. After my grandpa Vance passed away, my grandmother Lizzie was left to raise 3 children. And to make money, she knotted bedspreads and so forth, and it was called, today they call it candle wicking, they don't call it knotted. And she would knot table scarves, bedspreads, and she would embroidery table scarves, pillowcases, and dish towels and things like that to support herself and her children. And I often wondered how she sold them, because the people in the community probably did their own, and they wouldn't buy them. So I ran across some receipts that she had found at my mom and daddy's house, and I found that she would send these items to Washington, D.C., to a place called Southern Industrial Educational Association, and they would mail her a check and a receipt back for what they purchased. And it tells about how what they paid for each one. Like a bedspread, like a knotted bedspread, it takes hours and days to make one of those. And she would get maybe like some were like she'd get $13, and some she'd maybe get $16 for. And today those things would probably cost $600 or more. And she also did work for a lady in Poughkeepsie, New York. I found a receipt from her. And my grandmother Lizzie remarried when my mother was a teenager, and they moved to Jefferson City, Tennessee. And I often wondered why they moved to Jefferson City, Tennessee, because I visited her a lot down there. We would go down, and she had this great big watermelon patch, and it was the best watermelon. Anyway, I did find some information in the same box that I found these receipts, where my grandfather, her husband, had gone to Tennessee to work on the road. And evidently while he was over there, he bought some land and a house. And that's where she moved to after she remarried. And my mother was a teenager when she went. And when she completed elementary school and was old enough to go to high school, there wasn't a high school near them anywhere out in the community where they lived. And it was a rural community too. And so she was sent to Newmarket, Tennessee to attend high school. And she would rent a room during the school months, and I guess she came home during the summer. And my mother met my father while she was attending high school in Newmarket, and that's where he lived. And he was a city boy, what they called a city boy. And after they were married, my grandmother Lizzie was trying to help them out, so she suggested that they go to North Carolina to live in their house out in the bamboo community.
What did your parents do to make money?
Well, they didn't have a car or anything, so my daddy couldn't go to town to work, and there probably weren't any jobs anyway. So he had to learn to be a farmer. And he didn't know anything about farming. He'd never cut a tree down or nothing. So, and most of the land was in trees. So he had to learn how to clear the trees. And the neighbors, I had talked to an elderly gentleman up there a few years ago before he passed away, and he told me how my daddy got his land cleared. The neighbors went in and helped him clear the land, cut the trees, used horses to pull out the stumps, and cleared the land, and then they taught him how to farm, because most of the people in that community were farmers.
What did you have at your farm?
We grew a lot of corn, cabbage, and potatoes like most of the other people, because that's what they sold, especially potatoes and cabbage. And lots of people had cattle and pigs, and that they would sell or either put up themselves or something, especially the pigs. We didn't have any cattle to use for meat. We only had a few cows for milking, and I can remember my mother, we had milk cans, and she would put the milk, they had a filter, like a paper filter that she would pour the milk through into the can. And right before it was time for the milkman who picked up the milk jugs, they were big containers, she'd take them down to the road and she'd sell the milk, and he would take them to the dairy. And I can remember him coming by. His name was Mr. Hampton. And we did have pigs, though, and each fall when the weather was cool enough to do something with the pigs, some of the neighbor men came and helped with the slaughtering. And it just broke my heart, and I'd go upstairs and put my hands over my ears because I didn't want them to hear shooting them, because those were my pigs they were shooting. But they would hang them up. I guess they nailed them up. I don't know how they hung them up on a wall to cut them open and get rid of the part that wasn't any good, that you didn't want to eat. And I don't really know how they got rid of the hairs on the skin, but I know they had a big black pot with a fire under it out there, and I think maybe they would get the outside of the pig so hot that they could scrape the hairs off of it. And so they'd get them ready to cut up for my mother to can. And she canned everything out of that pig that she could possibly can. She would can the liver, and later could make the best liver mush you've ever eaten in your life. And she canned pig's feet. She loved pig's feet, but I've never eaten any, and I'm not going to ever eat any. And then the rest of the pork she just canned in pieces, and we would later, she would fry it out in a skillet, and we would eat it. And we had lots of chickens, and I can remember sitting out on the back, we had a rock out there at the back of the house, and my mama wanted a chicken for Sunday dinner, and my daddy cut its head off, chopped its head off, and it kept running around the yard with its head cut off. And then we had a big garden, so we always had plenty to eat because my mama canned everything possible that there was to can. We had cherry and apple trees. We had grapevines and raspberry bushes, and we very seldom ever had meat during the week, except maybe for breakfast. Sometimes we'd have bacon or sausage or ham, and for breakfast. But we always had meat on Sunday, and lots of it, and for the main meal on Sunday. And Mother would bake cakes, pies, and cookies on Saturday, and of course we couldn't touch them because they were for Sunday, and most of the time we had company on Sunday, so she was saving it for company.
What did you and your siblings like to do for fun around the house?
Well, we played outside as much as we could. We loved to play outside, and none of us had any bikes, bicycles, tricycles, or anything. Swings, or we had very few toys. I don't remember having many toys at all. And we would go down in the woods and swing on the grapevines that grew up in the trees, and we played with our cats and dog, but we had to help with the work a lot, so there wasn't always time to play.
Tell me about your school.
Okay, the school was right across from my house, and that was great because you had to walk to school, so I didn't have very far to walk. And it's still there, but it's used as a barn now. And there were grades 1 through 7 there, and there were no school buses except for the high school students, and most of the high school students had to walk a long way to catch the bus. I know of one girl that had to walk 3 miles just to catch the bus to go to high school. And when weather got bad, such as snow and all, no matter how bad it was, they didn't close the school because you walked to school. If you couldn't come, that was just too bad. You know, but every time, most all people came. And sometimes the snow was so deep that the teachers maybe couldn't get home that afternoon, and they would rent rooms from us in the wintertime. Since we lived right across from school, we had the extra bedrooms upstairs, and so they would rent rooms from my parents. And our school had 3 classrooms and a lunchroom with a stage.
Since you only had 3 classrooms, how were the grades divided up?
Okay, one room was for grades 1 and 2, and then there was another room for grades 3 and 4, and the third one was for grades 5, 6, and 7. And there were probably, I would estimate 30 to 40, somewhere between 30 and 40 students at the whole school. So we knew everybody. And each schoolroom was heated with a coal stove. We had a well for water and an outside toilet.
Do you have any memories of something like a special event at school?
Well, we had events at the school. I know that we had plays that they put on at the stage, and the community was invited. And I'm sure we had Christmas plays and all that stuff, you know. And I can remember we had cakewalks. That's where they would put, if I remember correctly, they'd put like if they had 10 cakes, the ladies had baked 10 cakes, around in a big circle, they would put the numbers 1 through 10 or whatever, you know. And we would hold onto each other. You'd walk, and the person behind you would put their hands on your shoulders, and you'd walk around, and when they called stop, if you were at number 1, you got that cake. And then it kept on till all 10, somebody won all 10 of them, you know, whoever won all 10. So, and then we had boxed suppers. The women and girls would bring a boxed meal, maybe one that was cooked, or it could be just a sandwich and something. Most of the time it was chicken and vegetables and stuff like that. And the men would bid on them. And whoever, they didn't know whose box it was. And whoever bid the highest for your box, that's who you had to eat supper with. So I'd always make sure my daddy knew what my box looked like, and I'd beg him to buy my box, which he usually did. And because I didn't want to eat it with someone else. And at school, during recess, I remember playing ball, and we skipped rope. We played ring around the roses, hopscotch and tag. And the school was right next to big woods. And when it was warm enough, we'd go out in the woods, us girls would, and everybody would build their own little playhouse out of rocks and sticks and whatever. Of course, when it rained, you know, it went kapooey, but we'd go back out the next time and rebuild it. I also remember when it snowed, we played outside an awful lot, you know, especially at home. And our daddy had a long plank that he fixed up for us. And I don't know how he fixed it up, but he nailed a rope on the front of it so we could pull it back up the hill. and all 5 of us would sit on it and ride down it at the same time. We had a good time. And the road was, from our house to the road was probably as far from your school, Morgan, as maybe out to Captain D's, you know. And but down in front of the road on the right was a very, very sharp curve. And it always drifted. And if we had a big snow, it really drifted high, and no one could get through. And there were no snow plows, and not many people had tractors, and the tractors wouldn't have moved it anyway. And one time the high school bus got stuck down there, and I have a picture of my brother and myself and I standing behind the school bus. And one time, it's only one time that I can remember this, the winter was so bad and the drift was so high that the drift stayed there from November until March.
Is there any memory that kind of stands out about school when you were younger? Something special happened?
Well, let's see. I'm sure there were a lot of things, but I can't remember too much. Oh, I do remember one thing. We had a beauty contest. And it was between me and another girl. And my mama wanted me to win so bad that she gave me a permanent the night before so I'd have curly hair. But I didn't win. The students voted, and I lost. But and when I was in the 4th grade, we were asked to write a poem, and they were sent off. In fact, I was told by somebody that they were put in some kind of magazine in the state, but I didn't have a magazine, so I don't know if it got in there or not. But I won first prize and a blue ribbon and $1. I wrote a poem about a bunny, and I still have it. And in fact, 2 years in a row, I wrote a poem and got a blue ribbon, but I can only remember getting $1 one time. And I bought a desk with my $1, and I still have it. And I used to take the country magazine, and I opened it one day, and there was a picture of the same desk in that country magazine. And I don't think there were many of them made, but it's, according to the magazine, it's over 100 years old.
Do you have any family keepsakes, like a photo album or?
Well, I have lots of pictures. I need to get them in a photo album. But there weren't many pictures of me. And when I was little, there were more pictures of my older brothers and sisters than of me. I guess by the time I came along, they quit taking pictures. But anyway, I have a lot of keepsakes. I have my mother's knotted bedspread. And I have a basket that a great aunt made, and I'm sure it's over 100 years old. And I have a handmade quilt, and it's all handmade. There's not anything done on the sewing machine on it. That was made by my husband's grandmother, and it is probably maybe 70 years old. And I have a silver purse of my mother's from the 1930s. She used to do the Charleston for us. It was a dance they did in the 30s, and she could do it good. I also have a doll bed and a little rocking chair that Grandpa made for my mother.
What do you remember about Boone most when you were a child? Like, or is anything the same?
Well, not really. Boone has changed so much. It has just, grown up, and we didn't get to go to town very often. The one thing I do remember was going to Smithy's department store, and it was on the other side of Boone, and that building is still there. And we would, when we got to go to town, which we didn't get to go very often, and Mother would go to Smithy's maybe to pick up some flour and sugar and stuff like that, and she bought her oilcloth tablecloths there. And I can remember going into Smithy's, and they would be making bologna sandwiches on their grill. And oh gosh, you talk about smelling good. I wanted one of those so bad, but we didn't have the money. And also, I don't think the building where I bought my desk is still there, but it was on the upper end of town too. It was a big, big warehouse, and it was filled with all kinds of furniture, toys, dishes, just about anything that you could think of to buy there. It's kind of like a indoor flea market back then, you know. And that's where I bought my desk. And you know, I think Boone has changed so much due to the college. But there, as you go into Boone, where Walmart and all that is, I can remember even when I was in high school, very little of that was developed. It was just mostly open land, and the college wasn't very big at all. In fact, my high school that I went to in Boone is now part of the college. I don't know what they use it for, but it's a big rock building up there, and the college now owns it. And I'm trying to think what else might have. I remember when I was about 12 years old, we had gone to Boone, and my mama let me go to the movies with my brother because he wanted to go see this Western. Well, no, I wasn't 12. I was a whole lot younger. And he might have been 12, and I was probably about 6. And when they got to shooting, it scared me, and he had to take me out. And he got so mad at me because he didn't get to see the movie. But Boone is, you know, due to the college, it's just so crowded, and it's nothing like it used to be. Even the old hospital is still there, but it's still, I think it's still there, but it's part of the college now. And it may have been torn out, I can't remember exactly. But it's nothing like it used to be.
When did you move to Hudson?
Well, when I was 14, we moved to Blowing Rock. And I went to Boone to school because my mama wanted me to take typing and bookkeeping and all that stuff. And Blowing Rock didn't have it. So I had to go back and forth, and I had to find my own rides. I'd ride with whoever I could find a ride with. Sometimes I rode the Greyhound bus, and sometimes it was hard getting back and forth. But Blowing Rock has even changed. Well, after that's where I met my husband, and we lived there after we were married for 4 years. And even then, you would go to uptown at night, and you might not even see a car on the street. Now you can't find a parking place. And he got a job teaching down at Hudson High School, and we moved down. He drove back and forth for 2 years, and then we moved to Hudson in 1962, and I've been here ever since.
What's the same to you? What's changed?
What's changed? Well, right here on my street, which we've lived on this street since we moved down here, Hilltop Street, the roads were not paved. A lot of roads weren't paved. Our road wasn't paved. And we, of course, didn't have trash pickup and things like that. And the train wasn't just 2 little sections. It was a whole train, 2 and 3 times a day going through town. And I was fascinated with that train when we first moved down here, because I'd never been around a train much, and I loved to hear it. And then after a while, you got used to the sound, and you didn't even pay any attention to it. You'd go through town, and you didn't even hear it. But now the train, maybe there's 2 cars go through every once in a while, maybe once a day. I don't know. I'm pretty sure they go through once a day, but I don't know how often. And the depot was there on Main Street as you turn into the Fair Value, right up there in that section. The train depot was there. I think it's been moved back behind the town offices now, the depot down there. And in fact, they have a case there that they have some items in, that it's a glass case that came from the house that you live in, Morgan. And so Hudson has changed. It's changed a lot. And my children went to the elementary school, what is now called the Hub, and the middle school was the high school back then. And but still, Hudson is a great place to live.
How do you want to be remembered?
How do I want to be remembered? Well, I hope people will remember me as a happy person, a kind person, and hopefully a generous person. But most of all, I want to be remembered as a good mother and a good grandmother.